Welcome, everybody, to the Takeaways edition of the Vegas Nation podcast. I'm your host, Heidi Fang, and we are brought to you by Station Casinos, STN Sports. Download that mobile app today. We're also presented to you on Blue Wire Podcast by Liquid Death from the Alps. Check it out. Looks like Mickey's, kind of, but Mickey's was green and gold. This one's a little more black and gold, but, check it out. Sparkling water. Straight from the Alps. Everybody, I'd like to welcome my guest today. Joining me, Heidi Ruiz, voice of the Raiders in Espanol, and also just one of the best people I've ever met in the media room. Harry, welcome to the show.
Damn, I think that speaks more about the other folks than that me. Just kidding. Great to be here, Heidi. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here in the amazing podcast studio that the Review Journal has. It feels like home, so it's great to be here with you guys.
I wanted to get you in here because I didn't know. I know you do updates for us from time to time. You've been, coming in. You did a lot of work on the rodeo, man. That was incredible what you did for that NFR stuff. Wanted to have you in because look at this cool studio, right?
Yeah,
and you can have Liquid Death.
Yes, exactly. But the Spanish crew is right next door, so that's where I usually work when I come in and fill in for Rosanna, who does an amazing job. So I'm like, okay, it's my first time actually recording a podcast here, so it's amazing.
Yeah,
Top of the line.
I love your calls in Spanish. They're always so passionate, and I love that. I love how you just put everything into it, and I know that's also probably in part because you're a lifelong Raider fan.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what people was like, hey, I feel your passion through it. I'm like, yeah, because if I weren't up here in the booth, I'd probably be in the black hole going crazy and without my voice because I'd be screaming for defense and enjoying touchdowns and everything. So now it's a different kind of passion, and it's like, okay, Sundays it's work, but at least I get to work for the team I grew up rooting for.
And so when you see the team that you grew up rooting for kind of move on from its 9-year quarterback, franchise quarterback, how did that make you feel? Like, what was your gut reaction to that move?
So I've been a Derek Carr defender for 9 years, but now
a stan or defender?
No, a defender. I'm like, don't go that far, but at the same time, I've been through that decade where it was a revolving door of quarterbacks, of coming and going, of drafting Jamarcus Russell and then going with veterans and not finding the solution. So for me, it was like, okay, Derek Carr at least he gives you the stability, but at the same time, he wasn't the problem nor the solution. And what does this team want to do? Do they just want to make it to the playoffs? No, they want to win a championship. Is Carr going to be able to win a championship in this franchise? I think after 9 years, we found out that might not be the case. So now the front office and this coaching staff, they decided to take another step towards another direction. And now we're going to have a very interesting offseason to see who's going to fill those shoes.
And before we get into talking about those shoes, I just wanted to go back to Derek Carr for a minute and say, I think the new regime was obviously giving him his opportunities. I think it was maybe a lot to learn on offense for him and trying to figure out the McDaniel system, which I hear is completely just really involved, very intricate for a quarterback to pick up, much less in the off season and then trying to apply it into the regular season. But when you think about Derek Carr transitioning as many times as he did from Musgrave to Todd Downing to Greg Olsen and back, because he had Greg Olsen a couple times, like just all of those coordinators and all of the changes in coaching, do you feel like sometimes maybe the chips were stacked against him?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you also see the situation with the defense, him never having a top of the line defense or at least a middle of the standings defense where you could be like, all right, at least they're going to get some stops. And then with the offense, you're able to recover and get some wins. And that wasn't the case. Derek Carr had the chip stacked against him, and then at the same time, he was able to bounce back always. It seemed like the second year when he was in the system, he would embrace it a little bit better, understand it a little bit better, and evolve in it. And unfortunately, he doesn't get this chance right now with the Raiders, but at the same time, I'll give props to the front office. They were able to be like, all right, after 1 year, they decided it's time to go another way. And at other times, you've seen in this team and in other teams that they just take too long to make that decision. Look at what happened in Philly. They had Carson Wentz, and they decided to go away from Carson Wentz, and then 5 years later, they're back in the Super Bowl with another quarterback. So it's at times it's difficult to make decisions, and the Raiders had to make one, and they did it, and now it's official. Derek Carr isn't the Raiders quarterback anymore.
And I think at times when you say, the team and the defense, that it has been a struggle. And that's what I wonder a lot about for this offseason. Isn't so much the quarterback, Because I think when you look at the offense, there's a lot of great pieces that this team has, from Hunter Renfrow to Darren Waller to Devontae Adams. And those guys are going to be staples, I think, of that core of the offense. So if you bring in a quarterback, let's say the choice A is Aaron Rodgers, choice B is Jimmy Garoppolo, choice C is a draft pick, and then anybody else that might be available, Jacoby Brissett, who knows?
You gotta show Stiddy some love, too.
Stiddy is an option. And that's interesting to me, too, because of the involvement he's had in the system. Same with Garoppolo, same with Brissett. Those guys have all had knowledge of this system that is very detailed. So just my question in all of that is, do you think it's more important right now for this team to focus on fixing and rebuilding the defense with their draft capital, or working on trying to build the quarterback position, and whether it's bringing in new talent or a free agent? Which would you rather see the team right now put their main focus into?
I mean, right now, not only right now, but pretty much for the past decade, the defense. You look and there's holes in all three phases of the game. You go with the line and you need more interior pressure. You need to figure out if Chandler Jones in that second half of the season, he unlocked all that potential that we know he has, and unfortunately an injury ended up making him miss the last couple of games. Is that a solution? Are you set with Max, who's elite in this league, and Chandler Jones, or do you have to bring in somebody to split reps with Chandler? And then in the middle, there's not enough pressure coming in from the middle. Of course, they've been solid against the run game, but it's incredible how low the number of sacks have been the last 2 to 3 years. And you have to get to the quarterback, especially in the AFC West, when you face a Patrick Mahomes twice a season, when you face a Justin Herbert twice a season, when you face a Russell Wilson who had a very down year in 2022, but he might have a bounce back in 2023.
That's with Sean Payton there now.
Exactly.
That's intriguing to me that they went and threw all their chips into the Sean Payton basket and said, we'll do it. What do you want? How much?
And that's a third of the games against quarterbacks that you need to get to, and they're very mobile and they can get through defensive lines. So you need to fix that. The linebackers, they allowed a lot of yardage through the middle of the field in the passing game. You need to set that up. And then the secondary, heck, that's been an issue for the Raiders also for plenty of years now. So in my opinion, you got to fix the defense, and the quarterback situation is you're going to figure it out eventually. And the thing is, the Raiders fortunately have their dates set very specifically. February 15th was a day where it was like, all right, Derek Carr situation. We'll figure out what happens. Derek Carr decided for them on Super Bowl Sunday. Then you got March 15th, the start of the league year, and then you got the draft. So everything is very set up where you're like, okay, the Raiders now have a month to figure out their game plan for free agency, to figure out if they trade for a quarterback or if they just sign a guy that Jarrett Stidham and Jacoby Brissett that's not going to cost them much, and then figure out what they do next. So in my opinion, you go defense first, and that has to be the main core. Heck, you look over at the offense and you're like, hey, any quarterback should be able to play with as many weapons.
I think so. And that's part of what I was kind of getting at with the earlier thing. And I feel bad now that I didn't show Stiddy some love, because I feel like a lot of Raider Nation is really behind Jarrett Stidham and that they want to see him get an opportunity. What did you see out of Jarrett Stidham in those last two games, from the 49ers to the Chiefs game, that really impressed you enough to say this could be the guy?
So I'll say specifically from the 49ers game, because that game I was completely shocked. When they got the ball first and they scored a touchdown immediately, I'm like, wait, what's going on here? And you saw a mobile quarterback that was going to the sides, and he was avoiding the rush and throwing out while he was moving. I was like, okay, this I haven't seen in the Raiders for a while, so it's refreshing to see. But you also saw his understanding of the system, of knowing what's going on. And at the end of the day, Heidi, it's the only system he's been in the NFL. He was 3 years with Coach McDaniels in New England. He came over to Vegas, and he's with McDaniels again. So that's the only thing he knows in the NFL. So unlike Derek Carr, who had been with 6 offensive coordinators or 6 different guys calling plays, and he knows a little bit of everything, and he has been in the NFL nearly a decade, Jarrett Stidham isn't going to question anything that's going on. He's going to be like, okay, that's what my coach is asking me to do. That's what I'm going to do. He goes out on the field, and he just follows the script, and it worked out very, very fine against the Niners. Then against the Chiefs, they had a week to see his tendencies, to see what he can do, and be like, okay, let's figure out a way to control him, and that's what they did.
And the obvious Super Bowl champions, like you mentioned earlier, you have the Herberts you got to face twice. You have Mahomes you got to face twice. And it's not just Mahomes, it's Andy Reid. Andy Reid is an incredible coach. And those two as a tandem, they are just really hard to crack. To crack. Speaking of which. But have some little sip for cleanse the palate. But with those two in mind and with all of that in mind, and like you said, that it could be somebody that could just step into that offense and all. I think, do you think that Aaron Rodgers could in fact elevate this team to be a team that scores 40 points a game, let's say, to get past those tandems of coaches and quarterbacks that have done well? Well, Staley, I don't know if I put him up there in that tandem yet because he's made some really bad, as our guy JT says, boy blunder. He's made a lot of mistakes. When you think about
and I'm happy
that,
he's made a lot of mistakes because we've been able to enjoy some wins against the Chargers.
100%.
But yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the last decade. In the last 2 decades, he's been one of the premier players in the NFL. But now you also look at the situation. It's like he's going to take more space in the cap space. He's going to earn more money. You're going to have to move your chips around and be able to make it work, which they can eventually do. But at the same time, that's a little bit more extra work to also. It's like, do you prefer to use some of those draft picks instead of sending them to Green Bay to use them yourself? Look at Seattle last year. They had a lot of rookies playing from that draft class, including a first-rounder as a left tackle and a third-rounder as a right tackle, and they didn't miss a beat, and they made it to the playoffs. And it's like they were a very good team despite having all those young guys out there. Why? Because they were able to draft the right way for their roster. So if you use Rodgers, if you get Rodgers, you know you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of draft capital.
That's why I wonder, is that worth it? Because you figure you at least have to give up the 7. You have to probably give that up to get Rodgers. And then the money, you already free up about $30 million with Carr's contract, right? And they have the dead cap hit about almost $6 million. But they still have freed up about $29.25 million with Carr's release. And then you think about the other guys you have to bring back. You're going to bring back Josh Jacobs, although that might be a franchise tag. Right. You think about maybe you take the risk on bringing back Perryman or Matt Collins, Foster Moreau, who knows? There's a lot of people that need to be figured into the equation.
Yeah, free agency means your own free agents that are not under contract anymore, but also the guys that you want to bring in for those holes that you have on your roster. And that's something that we noticed last year. Once the injured players started stacking up, when you missed out on a Divine Diablo, it's like, okay, we're going to have to go with a Masterson or a Butler who are undrafted free agents and roll the dice and see if it works, because that's all you have in your roster. But at the same time, it's like, hey, you know what? This front office, they've shown us if they see something they don't like on the team, they're okay with cutting them and letting them go away. Look at Tyreek Gillespie, who was a draft pick from the previous season. Look at a guy like Kenyon Drake, who's counting against the dead cap for next year as well. It's like if they see something they're not into, they're going to say goodbye and they're going to bring in somebody else in and hope they get the job done.
Awesome, Harry. I want to get more into what we think landing spots could be for Derek Carr. Also, we have some questions from the fans on Twitter that we're going to get to and answer right after this break. I'm going to crack open my Liquid Death next. Welcome back to the Takeaways edition of the Vegas Nation podcast. It's Heidi Fang, and I'm joined here with the voice of the Espanol broadcast, Harry Ruiz for the Raiders. I wanted to talk more about the Derek Carr situation. He has moved on. He's been released. They cut ties with him. When you think about possible landing spots for him, do you think that he goes to a place where the AFC may see more of him still competing, or does he go maybe to one of those NFC South teams that's a little crippled in the quarterback positions?
Yeah, the NFC South is interesting, especially you look at the competition down there and you're like, okay, he'll have a good chance to make it to the playoffs without having to win 12, 13 games. So that would be nice for him. And at the same time, there are squads where you look at their defenses and you're like, hey, you know what? If Carr has a good year, he doesn't need to have an excellent year. He'll be able to make it into the postseason. And it's funny, I was talking with Mario Jerez, the Spanish broadcaster for the New Orleans Saints, and he was like, dude, it's funny that last time that we were talking, it was about the Raiders getting shut out by the New Orleans Saints, and now everybody's talking about Derek Carr coming to that same squad that got him shut out. Do you think it would work? I'm like, look, I'm a big fan of the New Orleans Saints defense. I like the pieces that they have there, and he has knowledge of Dennis Allen, his first head coach in the NFL. And you look over and you got Alvin Kamara, and you're like, hey, that's a running back that can change the game for you. And they got a young wide receiver out there as well, so you're like, okay, it could make it work. Me personally, I would say the Jets.
Okay.
I like the project that they got going on over there, but it's cold out there. So maybe for him, being in the Dome in New Orleans would be a great situation.
Yeah, I think domes might be a little better considering what we know Carr's record to be in the cold, but I do wish him well. I do think that he will have some kind of market. I wonder what would have happened if he'd taken the Saints deal now, but now we're going to find out what the open market thinks his value is, and that to me will be an interesting part for his journey to see whether or not he could have gotten it better with keeping with the Saints, although I do hear that they wanted him to take a pay cut. So that was probably the deal breaker.
And hey, look, at the end of the day as well, you can look at quarterbacks in the past, like a Tom Brady, who takes a pay cut to make his team better. And that could be the situation with Derek Carr, where he wants to go out there and prove it. What about if he signs a one-year deal at a lesser value and just goes out there, balls out, and then the next year he gets paid the money that he wants to get paid, or that he's worth?
It could happen. I mean, he did lead this team to 2 playoffs, although he didn't get the win, but he didn't get to play in one of them either. And the Bengals ended up in the Super Bowl. So it is one of those things that's a tough road no matter which way you cut it for him, and how the playoffs happened and how they got there and all that adversity that really happened during the 2021 season. I just had such a high opinion of him as a person and his character for going through all of that and really having to not just talk about it week after week after week, but the way that he put a lot on his back for the team, and they ended up coming out of the depths of darkness, which I didn't think anyone expected.
He's a leader. He's a proven leader. He's a leader of men. He can go out there, preach to his guys, and have them listen. There's other guys that get in front of an audience, talk, say things, and one thing goes through one ear and the other one comes out through the other, and it's like they don't get it. With Derek Carr, people understand it. They like him. He's a great guy. The thing was, he had 9 years with the Raiders. No playoff wins to prove it. It's not completely his fault, but at the end of the day, the most important position in a football team is the quarterback.
Yeah.
So the Raiders, they're going in a different direction, and now it's like, what do you do to make the right step towards the right direction? Because we've seen a lot of teams make that decision to go with another quarterback and then strike out miserably and then have to go again. Look at Arizona. They went with Josh Rosen, and then immediately they had to go for the number 1 pick to get Kyler Murray.
That was an interesting chain of events that happened there. And that's why I wonder, too, with not just Arizona's situation, but particularly, again, and I go back to Aaron Rodgers here, with that situation because of the drafting of Jordan Love. And if that one, and we know it set a fire under him because he made it kind of known that it set a fire under him. But now that you see that it's coming up, 4th, 5th year for Jordan Love, if the Packers want to test what they have there and then see, okay, Aaron Rodgers, you're 39, when do you start moving on from him as a franchise to kind of see what you do have with your younger players? Well, they have all these young wide receivers that he just wasn't meshing with, and he did have a year that was subpar by Aaron Rodgers standards. Didn't make the playoffs, didn't throw for 4,000 yards, had a quarterback rating, I want to say, at 39.8 or so. So when you think about all of those things, like, do you think that that was the beginning of a drop-off for him? Or do you think that it was just the circumstances around the year for Aaron Rodgers?
I mean, heck, you lose Devontae Adams, a guy that's going to get you 1,500 yards a year. You know that your production is going to drop off, especially when all you do is bring in a rookie to try to replace him. So there's not going to be the same connection there between Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers as there is with a rookie wide receiver and the franchise quarterback. So that's a drop-off. And also, Heidi, you look over at what happened in Green Bay, Week 18, they still had a chance of making it to the playoffs.
They did.
It's not like
and it was a decent chance.
Exactly. It was win and you're in.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they weren't able to win against a very good Detroit Lions team. So it's not like they were the Raiders going into Week 18 without a chance of making it into the playoffs. So Aaron Rodgers, he didn't have that star season like he did in 2020 and 2021 where he was the back-to-back MVP. But he did have a decent year. He did have the Packers fighting for a spot. So now it's the same situation where I said about Derek Carr in a dome.
Yeah.
How better would it be for Aaron Rodgers to play all his home games at Allegiant Stadium where there's no
elements?
Exactly. No rain, no snow, no wind, no nothing. It's like, I think that would be the best case scenario for him.
Plus Devontae Adams, who's obviously tweeting in favor and campaigning for Aaron Rodgers to come.
Plus Darren Waller, plus Hunter Renfrow, plus Josh Jacobs, potentially, hopefully.
That is a question, actually, that comes from Yair. He wants to know, is Josh Jacobs going to stay or go after seeing how they treated Carr?
I think he's going to stay. I mean, to guarantee he's going to stay, I think they're going to put the franchise tag on him, which, when was the last time the Raiders used the franchise tag?
Yeah.
It's been a while. I want to say 2014, 2015, potentially. Tyvon Branch? There you go. I remembered who it was. Tyvon Branch was the last guy to get franchise tagged, and he signed an extension before playing on the franchise tag. I think it's going to be a similar situation. They'll sign him with the franchise tag, and then they'll use that time to negotiate with him a contract extension instead of just letting him test the market, because when you're the leading rusher in the NFL, you have a lot of attention on you. Unfortunately, that position, it's being devalued with every year as it goes by, and you look at rookie classes coming into the NFL and killing it. There's a lot of teams saying, you know what, I'm going to let my franchise running back go to bringing in a young guy. Unfortunately for the Raiders, that plan didn't go well, or well, fortunately, I would say, because they had the leading rusher in the NFL, first time since Marcus Allen, and be like, okay, let's roll with this guy because he's not only a good running back, he's an excellent running back.
Yeah, he's right up there in their top 5 of all-time leading rushers as well already at this phase of his career. It's pretty incredible.
4 years in.
Yeah. Now we have a question from Just One Windy, and she says, can you go over which of the D backfield might be kept on the team? Interested in the corners, linebackers, and safeties. Not that you know for sure, but your best guess. That's her question.
I mean, I think they're going to give Trayvon Merrick another chance. He was a high draft pick, second rounder. He had a very good first year, but he struggled with the Patrick Graham scheme and the way that Patrick Graham goes a little bit more into a deep side of the pool instead of just staying over here on the kiddie side where it's like a little bit more fundamental. It's like, no, he goes a little bit deeper, and
I like that.
but because it has a high potential to do big things and have a great defense instead of just the basic defense that's like stopping the bleed a little bit, but then it just pours out. So I think Merrick is going to have another chance. Nate Hobbs, of course, he's a guy that you look at and you're thinking, okay, he can grow into being a great cornerback in that position. But unfortunately, Duron Harmon, I would like him back. I liked his leadership. I liked the way that he was mentoring the guys. Every time we would interview him, I think we would all leave smarter because we're like, hey, this guy, this guy, he knows his stuff. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I think his knowledge that he can impart of that defense that he's been a part of in the past, it would be great to bring him back. But there's not a lot of pieces around that defense that you're like, hey, you know what? It's amazing. So you got to build up that defense big time.
There's at least 4 or 5 pieces. Obviously, Max Crosby, you know, that I'd say, you should keep those guys. But I wonder, you mentioned earlier the defensive tackles and the interior push. And one of the things I noticed with Patrick Graham immediately was that he went with bigger bodied guys. But do you think that helped this year in seeing the 300-plus pound guys, the 6'5", big shouldered dudes, did that really help? Because I didn't seem to notice the numbers kind of changing on the pressures and all of that with those Bilal Nichols types and Andrew Billings.
I think it helped out in one aspect. When you look at the Raiders defense, I think one of their very few spots where they were above league average was rush defense. Yeah. So they were able to do a good job, especially with Max Crosby elevating his game in that aspect, getting a lot of leading the league in tackles for loss for defensive linemen. It's like, okay, you know that the rush defense is good, but at the end of the day, the NFL right now, it's becoming a pass game. It's becoming a league that's air defense. It's like air offense. They're going straight to getting 300-plus yards for their quarterbacks. You need to get to the quarterback. So Jerry Tillery, when he came in, I saw him unlock a little bit more from the edges for the Raiders. So maybe, no disrespect to Billings, but Artillery was able to do a little bit more in the little time he was with the Raiders. So maybe that shows the defensive masterminds of the Raiders to be like, okay, let's look for Artillery, who's still a big guy, but he was a little bit more athletic in the middle.
I agree. And those were things that definitely helped this team along the stretch, and you could see that, and they needed that coverage guy. They definitely needed it, and that's something I think over the past at least 5 years in fresh memory, that the team hasn't really had a guy that is just really good at finishing, batting down passes, getting the coverage kind of work done for this team.
Yeah, and you look over at a Kansas City Chiefs, and they got a Chris Jones up there that by himself, he makes the rest of his defensive line better. You need somebody like that, disruptive, that just breaks up everything that the offense is planning to do, both in the pass game and the rush game. So that's what I'm pushing towards. I'm like, if you can find a guy that can do something like a Chris Jones, that's somebody you got to bring into this team, or create him, make him, and have him be your guy.
I was going to do one more check for questions. That is the final question that we have from Twitter today. I appreciate those of you that did chime in. And of course,
very short notice, by the way.
I know.
When Heidi was like, we already got questions, I was like, Heidi, you posted that tweet 5 minutes ago.
And I'm happy for it. I really
Raider Nation, you rock.
That they come and educated questions, and that I have somebody like Harry from the Spanish broadcast for the Raiders, as well as, sorry, I did not mention this earlier, the founder of La Nacion Raider. Did I say it right?
You said it perfectly.
I try to do my accent, and I try. And then also,
one day you'll say my name like my mom says it.
How?
Harry.
Oh,
that's like in Spanish.
Aww.
Harry Ruiz.
I love it. It's funny. I did a call yesterday with somebody from Florida, and they kept calling me Heidi.
Heidi.
Yeah.
So that's how my mom would call you.
That's my Spanish name. And Harry is Harry.
Harry. Harry in Espanol, Harry in English.
Larry, how'd I do it? Okay.
I'm like,
he claps.
I'm
Larry
like, just
claps.
don't say Henry. Because I've had people say Henry. I'm like, well, that's a completely different name.
No, not even. But again, you're the also Lights Insider. You're heading out to that.
Yeah, I'm going to practice right now. They got their season starting in less than a month on March 12th. Yeah. So that's going to be exciting. And I'm also freelance out here with the Review Journal, which I enjoy very much. Yes. Shout out to all the crew out here as well. You guys are top of the line.
Oh, thanks, man. And again, always appreciate having you in the media room for insights. It's great how we always kind of banter things in that media room. And I love when you speak about certain things, because the voice, Harry, is always, like you said, that passion and always driving home really important points that matter to Raider Nation. So appreciate you as always, and give him a follow on Twitter at Harry Ruiz. For Harry, I'm Heidi. Thank you so much for tuning in.